Can this mini PC give your computer a run for its money? Let's find out. Dave Taylor here, and I'm looking at this. This device that's smaller than a big paperback book is the Azulle Byte3 Fanless Mini PC. And it looks small, but don't be deceived. There's a lot jammed into here. This features a 64-bit quad-core Intel Apollo Lake running at 1.5 gigahertz and 4 gig of RAM, though you can go as little as 2 and as much as 8. RAM's expensive though, that's going to affect your price. And by default it has a 32 gig internal drive and an M2 SATA slot. So you can actually plug in a second drive, all super nice, small, easy to work with. You can get it installed with Windows 10 Pro or with Linux. Getting Linux makes it a tiny bit less expensive. So let's go through a quick tour of all the ports and everything, and then I'll give you a quick demo and we'll talk about performance. Now, first, however, I want to go through and show you just a little bit, or just tell you what's going on here. So we have an LG 24-inch monitor I bought separately. We have a Wharfdale speaker. Tell me this is not like total rock and roll speaker. It's actually a really nice sounding speaker, and it has a flashlight feature. Seriously, does your computer speaker have a flashlight? See, there you go. Not such a bad thing. And of course we have the Byte 3 with its little IR remote, but I jumped directly to this. This is the Azulle LYNK remote, and why I got this is because it gives you a teeny tiny little keyboard, and on the other side it gives you the ability to emulate a mouse, all obviously wirelessly, and it has a microphone feature. So super handy for you to be able to just work directly with this without having any wires stretching across your room. Because let's face it, this is really designed to be a server, a media server, a print server, a file server, whatever you're going to do with it. This is probably not going to be your main day-to-day PC, though it could be. It obviously is running Windows 10, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we have there when we get to it. Now, let's start with the ports. On the side, you have a micro SD, you have an SS port, and you have a USB 3.0. And then on the back, and I'll just go from top left to bottom right, you have a 3.5 millimeter audio jack, you have a Kensington lock, you have two USB 3.0 ports, you have a 1 gigabit Ethernet, you have HDMI, which is how I'm connecting to the TV, you have VGA, you have the power plug, you have a USB-C connection, and you have a Wi-Fi antenna. Now, let's see. The VGA can run at 1080p, and the HDMI, it's actually an HDMI 2.0, so it can drive a 4K monitor at 60 frames per second, so that's pretty good. That's going to work really nicely with your TV. Also has Bluetooth 4.0, and let's see, the Wi-Fi, it supports 2.4 and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, obviously 802.11, I don't know what, B, C, N, whatever, AC probably, all of that stuff. You probably double check their specs there, because that obviously was a little fast and loose on my part. So it goes. Now, let me show you what I'm doing. So I have this booted up, and I have to tell you, I used a regular plug-in keyboard at the beginning because there's a little catch-22, because the very first thing you want to do is you have to enter something on the configuration that doesn't show you what you're entering, which makes it pretty darn hard to figure out how this keyboard works. So I just plugged in a regular keyboard and flew through all the configurations. Super easy. I mean, you know, how hard is it to configure a Windows 10 computer, right? And now, on here, I think of these as media players, right? So I have Plex running down here. This is The Man Who Would Be King with Michael Caine. And then up here, I have Xfinity streaming. So now, using this, let's see if we can get some of this to work. So first off, let's go here and we'll just play just for a second. And you can see, and the audio is coming out of here because this LG monitor doesn't actually have any audio, and obviously this device doesn't have space for a speaker. So we have the video working there, and let's see, maybe we can go full screen for a second or two, and let's see how that's working. So this obviously can work as your TV, and yes, I'm talking the whole time because I don't want to get into any trouble with rights. So let's pause that, and let's see. So the mouse takes a little getting used to, and we're going to go over here to Plex, and like I said, on the Plex I have The Man Who Would Be King. Here we go. It's not quite as bright as the other program, but still, obviously it's working perfectly well with my Plex server, which is a couple of rooms over, and that's actually running off a Mac Mini, which is almost the same form factor and 3 times as expensive. Okay, we'll stop this and we'll go back to where we were. So it works. It works well. It's surprisingly decent in its performance, and it's certainly, you plug in a keyboard and a mouse and you have a monitor, you're good to go. But you can also just plug this into your TV and it'll work great as a, set-top box with way more capabilities than all the stuff that's out there that you're buying from your cable company for $30 a month. This thing is a one-time investment. You update, you put in software, you do whatever you want. It is your PC or your Linux box, whatever you want to do. And I would guess if you're running Linux, it'll actually run even faster because Linux is generally a little bit more power efficient. So here's what I did to give you some sense of its performance. I ran the WMI object performance numbers, and this is a range of 1 to 10 on a variety of different scales. It's actually built into Windows 10. You can go onto my AskDaveTaylor.com site and you can get an article to see, run your own numbers, compare what you have with what this does. That'll give you some good data. But as you can see in this little inset, it gives you a CPU score of 8.6, a D3D score of 9.9, and D3D is supposed to be for like video games and computer games and all that stuff, so that's a really great score. A disk score of 6.7, which isn't bad, it's not horribly slow. A graphics score of 4.5, well, that's not great. And a memory score of 5.9. Now you can increase your memory score by getting more RAM, so that's easy. And you can increase your disk score by, for example, if I put in an external SATA that was faster than the built-in 32 gig, that would give me a better score. But the graphics, that's kind of the weak link here. So if you want to get this and use this as a hardcore gaming machine, or you want to use it for things like, I don't know, Photoshop or video rendering or something, then that low graphics score might end up affecting you. But honestly, given the price point of this, you're probably not going to do that. You're probably going to just have this plugged in under your TV or in your entertainment console or underneath your desk in your office, and it's going to be running as a server, just chugging along day after day, working fine. So I think that having graphics be its lowest number is probably not a huge crisis. Your opinion may vary. So really, that's my experience with this, is that I will say it's a pretty decent computer. This works perfectly well. I could really see using this to drive a big 4K TV. This is just a regular HD 1080p TV, but obviously there's more going on and there's more power. And you'll notice that I have the audio plugged in to the monitor, not to the computer. So the HDMI is also, as you would expect, feeding audio. And it's pretty important because if it didn't do that, then it would be less capable and less useful as a media server. So the only other thing I'll say is it doesn't particularly run hot, which is nice, though it obviously has the possibility of running hot, which is why they have this sort of textured top on it. Like any of these devices, don't pile things on top of it. It's just asking for trouble. And otherwise, this is actually a nice little starter PC. This actually could work perfectly well if you have a teen who isn't a hardcore gamer but wants to get into maybe programming or security, or they want to learn Linux and they want to do a boot level install of a Linux OS instead of running it as a VM or something. This could work perfectly well. Actually really, really well for that. Plug it into whatever you want. I picked up this LG monitor. It was super cheap at Best Buy. Really good deal for this. I'm really happy with it. I could plug it into anything. I have lots of different screens here in the office, so that's pretty easy. I have to say, the thing that I found the most frustrating, though, was this remote. This remote requires you to be pretty dedicated to enter data, particularly if you're entering passwords, because you do have complex passwords, right? This thing's kind of a pain in the booty to work with. So if you're doing something like searching for your favorite movie by entering 3 or 4 letters of the movie name, this is going to work fine. For anything more serious than that, this might be something that you will actually fairly quickly jump over to a real keyboard. The mouse feature is pretty neat, but I also found that I had to constantly wake it up. See, I had to do it here again, because if it sits for a very short amount of time, it turns off, and then you have to push the mouse on-off button to get it to wake up. And then there's sort of this weird parallax thing where sometimes this is me pointing at the screen, and other times this is me pointing at the screen. So I find I do these sort of grand gestures to get and like find where the mouse is, and then I can actually use it for different controls. So now we can do things like, oops, I don't know. I'm not sure what just happened. Oh, I see. Okay. We don't want to go back to the movie, although, well, I do want to go back to the movie, but we're not going to go back to the movie in the video. So the good news is this is super inexpensive, so this is not a huge investment if you get it, and for the most part you don't use it or you just use your old keyboard, not a huge crisis. Now, let's talk about price. But before we get to price, can I ask if you can click on subscribe and go ahead and subscribe to my channel? Really appreciate when you do that. And while we're talking about it, do you have a little tiny mini computer or mini PC or something plugged into your TV other than what like Comcast is giving you? Tell me about it in the comments. I'm curious how people can figure up all their systems, because I have a fairly complicated setup in my house and in my office. So with that, this obviously has a variety of price points because of the different configuration options. The options that I have, which is the 1.5 gigahertz Apollo Lake, 4 gig of RAM, 32 gig internal drive, running Windows 10 Pro, licensed of course, come on, is $239.99, and you can pick it up at Amazon.com, or you can get more information about their product line at AzulleTech.com. And then the LYNK remote, this guy, and the other side with the keyboard, this guy is actually also can work for set-top boxes and Xbox One, PS4. It's just a general purpose remote with keyboard. So that's kind of cool, right? This is $29.99 at Amazon.com. So between the two of these for 250 bucks, you're actually doing pretty darn well. Plug it into a nice big screen and just get started. So it has its limitations. There are definitely some factors that are just inevitable in a device this size, and there are some additions you're going to want to plug in, most likely. But other than that, as a starter mini fanless PC, this is actually pretty impressive. So this is Dave Taylor. I'm going back to my movie, which means I will catch you in my next video.